Hello, my name is Maya James. I'm a staff member at Chapel Hill Public Library. And on behalf of the library and the town of Chapel Hill, the Crook's Corner Book Prize Foundation, and Flyleaf Books, thank you so much for being here and welcome. Tonight, we're going to be celebrating the 8th annual Crook's Corner Book Prize announcement. And we'll follow that up with a panel discussion with the winner to be announced in just a few minutes, a representative from their publisher, and Debbie S. Laskar, the winner of last year's prize. And this will be hosted by Leoneda Inge. Just a logistical announcement. At the end of this event, I'm going to post a survey in the chat, and I'll also email it to all attendees. And also, you may have seen in our advertising that Flyleaf Books is doing a drawing of all registered participants for a $20 gift card to Flyleaf Books. The winner will be contacted via email in the coming week. You can visit flyleafbooks.com to purchase the shortlisted books and tonight's winner. The Crook's Corner Book Prize is inspired by the prestigious book awards given by famous Parisian literary cafes and is co-sponsored by the iconic Southern restaurant, Crook's Corner. As you can see, I'm there in spirit tonight, here with the bar behind me, even though I can't be there for real in person. I'm there in spirit for sure, as we all are. The goal of the Crook's Corner Book Prize, which awards $5,000 for the best debut novel set in the American South, is to shine a light on new talent deserving to be seen. Even in the best of times, no one has a tougher time gaining recognition than first-time novelists, and never more so than in this pandemic year when bookstores have been closed and in-person author events canceled. It is a particular pleasure, therefore, to announce this year's winner. I'd like to introduce Anna Hayes, the president of the Crook's Corner Book Prize Foundation, and Gary Crunkleton of Crook's Corner for a pre-recorded announcement of the prize. Here we go. All right, Anna.
I can't, I wasn't planning to do this, folks. Hello, everyone.
Thank you for
Sorry about these 21st century issues. In any case, I just want to say how thrilled we are to have Cian Dason as our winner this year for her wonderful book, As a River, published by Jaded Ibis Press. And she's going to be with us on the panel tonight. So we're very excited about that. She's tuning in all the way from Spain, where she's living. And we're just looking forward to having her with us. So sorry about the glitch. We didn't get to show you the gigantic check for $5,000, which looks like one of those you see on the Publishers Clearinghouse winner things. And so that's on the way to Spain as we speak. And I see Cian down there on the screen. So glad to see you, Cian. Hello.
And,
Hi. So actually you were spared, seeing us do our video. It was, a homegrown effort, but
You'll have to send it to me after.
Yeah, that could happen. That could happen. In any case, I'm so delighted, to all the people who joined us tonight. Great thing, and the Chapel Hill Library is such a great partner for this book prize and such a wonderful asset to Chapel Hill. I'm going to turn it back over to Maya and to the panel, and I look forward to the rest of the evening. I'm going to disappear.
Thank you, Anna.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for your patience, and congratulations, Cian. We're so happy for you. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm joining you from Valencia, Spain, where it's 1 a.m, but excitement is keeping me awake. I am just so excited and thrilled and humbled by this honor. Truly, I want to thank Anna Hayes and everyone at the Crook's Corner Book Prize Foundation for this incredible award. Thank you, Maya and the Chapel Public Library for hosting Flyleaf Books, which once upon a time was my neighborhood bookstore. I want to thank Monique Trong, who was this year's judge, for selecting my work. And I also want to thank all the other amazing nominees. You know, even seeing my name on that list and being in such good company with talented writers like that truly felt like a triumph to me. So it's kind of indescribable to be here now at the very end of this process. And kind of feels that way because the journey of this book was very difficult and long. It took a very long time to find a publisher. So I want to thank Jaded Ibis Press, who is my publisher, for providing a home for this story. And yeah, this specific award means a lot to me because I actually grew up in Chapel Hill, so I can picture Crook's Corner in my mind. I wish we were all there right now. And I love that it's modeled on, you know, the awards given in Parisian cafes. I actually lived in Paris for 10 years and wrote the majority of the book there. And also my mother was a librarian at the Chapel Hill Public Library for decades. So the fact that we're being hosted here by the library is especially meaningful to me. And I know that the selection committee had no idea I had all of those personal connections when I submitted my book. So it's just really like an extra warm and lovely feeling to receive this award. And yeah, I am much more interested to hear other panelists and what they have to say rather than keep on blabbing. But it's really nice to have an occasion to celebrate something joyful. You know, I know so much is going on, and it's been a challenging time for so many people. It continues to be, but there's still good in the world. And I love that we're here to talk about the South and social change, right? Goodness knows we need social change. So thank you for all of these people who've tuned in. That means there are people who care about literature, who care about this topic, who want to have a conversation. So that's all wonderful things. Thank you so much for this award. I'm going to turn it back to you, Maya.
Thank you, Sian, and congratulations again. All right, so as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be having this panel discussion with Sian, hosted by Leoneda Inge. I want to tell you a little bit about Leoneda. We're so excited to have her here facilitating this event, this discussion. Leoneda Inge is WUNC's award-winning race and Southern culture reporter and co-host of the podcast Tested, a look at what the day's challenges tell us about where we are, what we believe, and who we want to be in North Carolina and the South. Leoneda's most recent work of note includes Black funerals, COVID-19, and the importance of saying goodbye, and a series of reports on race, slavery, memory, and monuments. In 2020, Leoneda's podcast essay, Black Women Vote, was included in the book 45 for 45, a publication of the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. Leoneda is a graduate of Florida A&M University and Columbia University, and was a Knight Wallace Fellow at the University of Michigan. Leoneda's travels include Berlin, Brussels, and Prague as a German-American Journalist Exchange Fellow. Now I'll turn you over to Leoneda.
Hello, everyone. How are you? You know, the only thing missing is a bowl of shrimp and grits at Crook's. You know, when we used to have this award, I've attended a few. We could actually be at the restaurant and just eating our hearts out, you know, from fried green tomatoes on down. And I must tell you, Sian, that's what you're missing. That is what we're missing tonight, you know, just being able to be together, all the camaraderie, and just being able to literally, you know, thank everyone for participating, and definitely to celebrate all of your hard work. So congratulations, congratulations. So, well, first of all, I mean, I'd like to, just talk a little bit to Sion. I mean, your book, um, that I have right here, I must tell you, as a river, you know, I didn't know what to think at first because as a journalist, I may have hundreds of books in my house. I know I do, hundreds. But, I have not read a lot of fiction, a lot of novels, because I actually felt what I was, the nonfiction that I was reading for work, was pretty much kind of like playing out in real life before my eyes. You know what I'm saying? So I hadn't read a lot of fiction. And then I started reading your book and I'm like, well then, wow. In a way, this is refreshing. And I guess that's why we do read fiction, especially stories about the South. And we know that in order to win this award, you don't necessarily have to have grown up or lived in the South, but the story better be Southern, right? But I was glad to know that you did grow up in Chapel Hill, or that you grew up in North Carolina at all. So one thing I definitely wanted to ask you was, you know, did this story, how was it, did your spark for telling stories actually begin here? I didn't know your mother was a librarian. So that tells a lot right there. But so when did you know that you had stories to tell, especially like this one?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think even in your question is part of the answer, right? I grew up in a house full of books. My mother has always been a librarian. So um, I've always been immersed in that literary world. But also, I think growing up in Chapel Hill too did have a big part of it. UNC is the oldest public university in the country. It's a very intellectually vibrant community. And there is a long tradition of, the Southern literary canon, and that did have an influence on me. But I think even more is the fact that it was, literature was something that was contemporary and alive. There were so many writers in the community, and my mother would always take us to readings. I have a memory of like going to, Lee Smith is a very prolific author, and there was an adaptation of one of her books into a musical, and we were in this very intimate theater watching this. And then, she was there, she was present. Or Flying Burrito was one of my favorite restaurants. And when I was a little kid, Sarah Dessen was a waitress there, and she would talk about her writing. And now she's one of the most famous, young adult writers. Randall Keenan, who we lost this past year. Brilliant. His book, Let the Dead Bury Their Dead, I think had a big influence on As a River, actually, his sort of mythic Timms Creek, North Carolina, and the structure of his book. So I think it's just the fact that I, grew up seeing this as a possibility as well. And I was also just a strange kid. Like I stayed inside to tell stories and type stories on my mom's electric typewriter rather than go out and play outside. So.
So that's another question. It makes me think of the community Bannon. Since it's fictional, did I pronounce it correctly? But Bannon,
Yeah.
Georgia, did you, does that remind you of another community in Georgia or Florida or Alabama or even North Carolina? What does it remind you of? What kind of community that you maybe come across? You said, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, it wasn't based on a real place. There was a freedom to me in creating my own community. The book was actually sparked by a line of dialogue I overheard while walking through Harlem in 2005, but the first scene I wrote, I immediately knew I was in the past. I immediately knew I was in Georgia. And I don't know why. I'm from North Carolina. I was almost self-conscious about that decision
In
as
North
well.
Carolina,
Um, but writing has always worked best for me when I just allow the creative impulse to, take over and not question some of those unconscious decisions and the unfolding that's happening on the page. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
Well, it does, because in a way, in many ways, this could have been anywhere in the South, right? And, you chose Georgia and the communities there, but I guess I could ask this question to you, and maybe Elizabeth can come on. Um, Elizabeth is, I guess the president of Jaded, did I pronounce it Jaded Ibis Press? Is she there? And
Dated Ibis Press, yes.
yes, I'm looking for you. There you are. And just mainly, I mean, what drew you to the story to even, publish such a work? I guess does it fall in line with some of the other works that you've published and are actually looking for, probably?
Absolutely. Yeah. I fell in love with this manuscript. I couldn't stop reading. I couldn't put it down. The writing is beautiful. The characters are fully rendered and beautiful and complex. And yeah, I think that what we look for, I don't know that there is such a thing as objective truth, but if there is, then it's arrived at through a shared subjective truth. And so we're looking for that personal story, that personal truth that that reveals the larger objective truth, if there is such a thing. And we really do like stories also that feature intersectionality and anything with themes related to social justice, feminism, revealing something just about what it's like to struggle in the world.
When I was first reading the book, it just made me think that, a lot of Southern books, fiction or non-fiction, that I've read of stories that seem to get a lot of attention, they sometimes have taken place in segregated communities, poor communities in the South. And I always wanted to know about that draw, that why do readers, why are they still so fascinated about the South in that way? Because, when I read these stories, I'm like, I didn't grow up like that at all, and I was born in Mobile, Alabama. So, but the stories that seem to get a lot of attention are the ones that, are like that. It's almost like, this fascination of what happened when the Civil War ended, like, how did we do? How did we do? And so I just wonder, how important in telling that story was to you, and even publishing it, and how new do you expect maybe some stories to come now after 2020? We may have some different types of books that may be the Southern literature of the new day, I guess.
well, I think Debbie's novel is
I
definitely
know.
Southern literature of the new day. So I'd love to have her voice in here as well.
It would be great, Debbie, because you're a winner. You're a big winner too. You're winner of this prize in 2020, and congratulations to you as well.
Thank you.
And you know what? When I first saw, hi there, when I first saw your book, The Atlas of Reds and Blues, I must tell you, I did not read it right away. I just let it sit there for weeks. And I said, because I was like, man, I do not feel like reading a book about the Civil War. because that's the first thing that popped. I was like, man, they lost. I mean, come on. But, oh my goodness. When I started reading it, I was like, I can't believe it. I was like, being a journalist with children, a woman of color in the South, I could not stop reading it, Debbie. I loved it. And so I just wanted to let you know that. And even all of you, like how I'm thinking of news stories in the South as well, and yours does address that. But how hard was it for you to even write this book, Debbie?
Well, before I answer that, I also wanted to tell Cian that I too grew up in Chapel Hill.
Yes.
And I frequented the old public library on Franklin Street many, many weeks of the year. and I too went to Carolina, and it was so funny to hear you say. I was like, ooh, I have to let her know that I too am a native. So it was really interesting because I had heard that Grace Paley said once that you're not actually supposed to write about what you know. You're supposed to write about what you don't know about what you know. And while the raid is true, I was not shot. So the raid did happen, but I decided that it would be a better story for me to try and get to a truth about what happened if it weren't about me. So I gave the main character a little bit of me. I gave her Atlanta, and I gave her the 3 kids and the dog. The truest thing about that book is the dog. Greta was real. And then the rest of it was me exploring. And just like in Cian's book, it was a book that tackled a really hard subject, even today, even now, that's very hard to discuss, which is racism and being invisible in America and being othered and misogyny, right? And so these are really hard topics. And so I welcome every chance and every book that tries to tackle it, because I think the more we have these kinds of stories, the easier it will be for us as readers, as writers, as citizens to talk about the big elephant in the room, right? Which is that not much actually has changed.
I think that goes back to, Leoneda, your original question, why do we keep having these stories? And I think it's because we've never fully reckoned, with our sins. Like if we if we need to keep telling the stories to the point where it's like, I think it's finally happening. Current events. Hi, it happened last week. Right. What I mean? And what are the roots of that? Right. I've had some readers say that they've gone back and read my book now that they feel like they finally have a better understanding of systemic racism, and because they were invested in my characters, and now they want to go back and read this human story, but through this new lens of their understanding.
I agree. I think that what has happened in the news has informed Cian's book, right? Because now people can see that, my biggest hope when I wrote Atlas was that it would spark conversation, because there will be no change without vigorous conversation and candid conversation. And people are still quite upset when the R word is used, right? Racist, or, and they get really upset and they feel attacked and they get defensive, and then the conversation stops, right? But I feel like, especially in light of what happened last week, I was like, okay, then books like Cian's are even more important today, because they're going to spark a conversation. When you're invested in a character like that, and then you turn and see people who resemble the characters you've been reading about, you want to have that conversation.
One thing, as I was thumbing back through Cian's book, I think one reason that I was so emotional was because of what happened earlier in the week, last week. And my own journalistic work had to totally change from the story that I had due for work Friday, part of a podcast, had to totally be changed because of what happened in, you know, in DC at the US Capitol. Do we not speak of it anymore? I'm tired of talking about it, actually. So, but because of what happened, so the only thing that brought me some solace and allowed me to get through it, I said, after speaking with my editors and producers, they said, well, we can talk about what happened in Washington, DC with that mob, that insurrection just a little bit, but just remind people, this has happened before. And so that means I just spoke about the 1898 massacre in Wilmington, North Carolina, that actually was sort of sparked partly because of a November election that didn't turn out like a lot of white supremacists wanted it to turn out. So they said, you know what? I see the problem. It's the Black people there. White people are sympathizing with them. They formed this fusion government, and we can't have that. And so they pretty much killed people, burned down businesses, ran people out of North Carolina. And at that time, Wilmington, North Carolina was the largest city in North Carolina, and actually forming a democracy and a community that Atlanta, Savannah, Richmond, they could all be jealous of, actually, especially coming, that close after the end of the Civil War, right? And so when I was, reading a part of As a River, I said, wow, especially, and I know people, hopefully the people in the audience will pick up these books and buy them and read them for themselves, but there is a scene that actually, I guess, can I say, it was pretty much a rape scene. And the way you described it, I was like, now, is this the 1940s or the 1840s? And I said, because I really don't see any difference in almost the way that, you wrote about it and described that particular scene. So maybe, Cian, you can talk more about, how important, you think this book can actually, bring about much discussion even today when we think of social, justice and racism, and really, I think making the South a place that people don't cringe about, thinking like, wow, that still goes on there, but maybe a place that is flourishing, really like much of the South is today.
That's a huge question.
So much.
Yeah.
I talk and think so much because I write so much too. I have to, I'm in radio, okay?
Yeah,
But
no, I love the way your mind is is thinking. I'm just like, whoo, it's kind of late. Okay, this is maybe sort of an elliptical way to talk about it, but I find it interesting that both Debbie and I have books set in Georgia. And last week, let's not talk about the Capitol. Let's talk about freaking Georgia. Let's talk about that and that political revolution. And how did that mass mobilization happen? Is that there was a huge effort to go out to communities that had been neglected, whose votes had been suppressed actively, door to door, one conversation at a time. When you let people know that their stories and their experiences matter, that's how change comes about. As a River is not explicitly about systemic racism. It is about people. There is poetry throughout the book, right? But it is one story at a time. And when you actually infuse a real story with that kind of humanity, I think that's what matters. So yeah, let's talk about Georgia for the win.
Yeah, I mean, like they say, Stacey Abrams worked her butt off, didn't she? And not just her, many people, you know, a lot of foot soldiers
Yeah.
out there. And that is very remarkable. I know at one point in the book, you know, I don't know, well, one part I know definitely, it was a small mention of how your main character, um, a Black man, how when he was abroad, I guess, he said he saw everything that was going on, you know, like the dogs, the water hoses, you know, people fighting for their civil rights. And I was glad that was mentioned, definitely, because I guess they said you cannot move forward if you forget that history. You know, you can't move forward. Another question I have for both of you is I enjoyed, maybe because of your upbringing and your parents and how you were raised, but you did both stories, you know, brought in an element of the world, you know, and I like, you know, when you go back and forth, you know, well, in Ghana, you know, this happened or this didn't, or, you know, in India, you know, when I'm with my family, you know, I love the way you both did that. And how important was it to actually have an international element to these very Southern stories?
Well, I wanted to, for me at least, I wanted to acknowledge, you know, I think that uh, when I was growing up, especially, I was frequently either welcomed to the United States or I was told to go home.
Mm.
And either one, actually, it's the same, because when you're frequently welcomed, that means you're outside the community and they're trying to, even though your English sounds just like this. And then, but also when you're told to go home after you've corrected someone's English, and, you know,
Like a school
you know,
teacher, right?
you know, then you're also in that same boat. And I wanted to just acknowledge in my story that, you know, we all come from somewhere else, and that the world is actually quite small. I mean, look at us in this panel. Two of us grew up in Chapel Hill, you know, and so I that was really important, that we just acknowledge that, you know, the world is shrinking, and we all wear many hats in the course of our lives. Yeah.
Well, Sian, what about you? And you know, and Ghana especially. I mean, you made, is it the gentleman? Do I want his name? Is it Greer? The main
Yeah,
character?
Greer.
Yeah, you made him very. I mean, you made him very worldly, even though he seemed to be you know, in a blue collar way, but he was worldly, and he had a lot to offer and a lot of perspectives floating around in his head. Like I'm sure a lot of us did when we were young and wanting to leave home in the South. I know I did. I, I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, and I remember saying, yeah, this boy wants to take me home to Nigeria for Christmas. My dad said, you're crazy and you're not going anywhere. Then he said, do you know you have to have a passport? I was like, what's that? I was like, a passport? What are you talking about? But no, that's I want you to talk about that. And I'm sure in the Chapel Hill Public Library, you always was dreaming of going somewhere, undoubtedly, because you're there now, right?
Well, my parents were huge travelers, so it was sort of in the blood. But also for my character, Greer, I mean, he grew up reading books, and books do open the world to you, even if you are in a small town and you know, it's very different from what you're reading. That's that's why you get lost in a book, because you imagine, oh wow, that exists, I want to go see it. Now the reason Greer left though is because he was fleeing something devastating in his hometown. It wasn't, prompted by the, okay, now it's finally my time to go. But yeah, and I think part of it is my personal experience too. I mean, I studied in Ghana. I lived in Paris. My literary hero is James Baldwin, and he wrote most of his seminal work while living abroad, because he said you really gain a clarity about your own country in a way by having so much distance.
That's true. Well, Elizabeth, I want you in the conversation because I wonder, what are you all reading now? I know you may not be able to reveal what you're writing now, but what are you reading now? And I don't know, maybe Elizabeth, the type of stories that your press is looking for.
Hi, yeah, thanks for asking that. We we're small. We publish 1 to 2 books a year so far, since 2016, since Lily Hong and I took the press over. But then in 2018, we became a nonprofit organization, and we've been able to recruit some new board members and raise some money. So we're growing, and we're going to be able to publish more books. This year in 2021, we're going to have 3 books, and we are excited about those. So yeah, in terms of what we're looking for, I mean, definitely check out Sand's book, because this is what we're looking for. But also, the other books that we have been published since 2016 are just a great representation of carrying basically the mission of our press into the world. And I believe in the power of literature and its ability to change the world and to change people's minds and perspectives, and to create cultural transformation also. And our mission, and you can see that on the website too, is that we're a feminist press committed to publishing socially engaged literature with an emphasis on the voices of people of color, people with disabilities, and other historically silenced and culturally marginalized voices. So we are, like I said, we're growing. Our leadership is expanding, and we're interested in all the work that's going to further this mission. And I'm looking forward to what we turn into, what we become over the next 5 years.
We're definitely looking forward to that as well. So, Debbie, what are you reading?
I am actually in the throes of editing book 2 right now. And so I just finished reading The Girl with the Louding Voice. And that was so good. And it too talks about a girl who really wants to be educated, right? And all the pitfalls of her society and her upbringing, and how, are stopping her. And so that was great. And I also just finished this wonderful book by Lily King, Writers and Lovers, and it's her latest novel. And I didn't actually know too much about her. She had written this really amazing book, loosely based on the life of Margaret Mead. It's called Euphoria, and it came out in 2014, and I totally missed it. I have no idea. It didn't register anywhere. And this past year, I was just looking around, and somebody's like, "Oh, what did you think of Euphoria?" And I, was like, "What's that?" And I read this book, and I could not put it down. And it's this really amazing story about, it's based on Margaret Mead, so it's a cultural anthropologist out in the field, but it's also a love story, and it's a suspense story, and I was just hooked, right? And so I've been trying to read stories that are just outside of what I would normally try and pick up. I just bought, but I have not yet read, but I have just bought Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. And I also read the book that won last year's DSC prize in India. It's called The Far Field. And it's about an Indian girl, but not Kashmiri, who goes to Kashmir and witnesses the political upheaval, but in a very minute way. And that was really beautifully written. I really enjoyed reading that.
Yeah, I'm being selfish. I'm getting my list together, you know.
I'm doing the same thing. I'm literally writing down.
The louding voice. Did you say
The Girl with the Louding Voice.
I've been meaning to get that and I didn't. I forgot.
It's so good. It's worth it. And then Writers and Lovers by Lily King. And the other one that I really recommend is Euphoria, because that's her Margaret Mead book. And then The Far Field.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see, it's your time. Your turn.
Yeah, I've got my
I am
pen
not going to
ready.
be able to follow up on that, honestly. I'm reading right now a book that's not out yet called Bone Broth. I was asked to blurb, and it's set soon after Ferguson and the uprising in Ferguson. So there you go, Leoneda. You want more current stories.
Who's it by?
Oh,
you can't say.
Think of the name right now.
Okay.
I will get back.
Okay.
On that. And I just want to acknowledge maybe other people are suffering from this too during confinement. I've actually had some trouble focusing on reading. I think there's so much trauma in the air that even my pleasures, such as reading, I've had trouble focusing. So I don't have as extensive a list as Debbie, I have to say.
I'm gonna just jump in here. I had such a hard time until I had to actually sit down and do my edits. And then I'm like, I'm drained from watching the news. And I'm like, I better go read a book, because if I don't read, I'm not gonna have anything to to sit on while I'm thinking, right? And that is the actual only reason I've been reading a lot in the last couple of weeks. It's like I've got to wake up and start working on my edits. And that is why, but I had such a hard time, especially right after the election. I had such a hard time. Yeah.
I have purchased more books than I should have during this pandemic, because I don't know, I'm addicted. And you know what? I purchased them. I'm giving them away though. They're like the best gifts. And so I'm not only purchasing books online, then I'm going to the library, not to the library, but to the post office, spending money on, the Senate, not express mail, but priority mail. I'm spending like $7. I'm like addicted, especially children's books, because I feel this is a time, and there's some wonderful, books about, like the book that I probably purchased 10 of or so, 10, 12, was it The Anti-Racist Child, or The Anti-Racist Baby? I purchased probably like 10 of those books. I was like, let me start sending them to people. And, but also I like to thank you ladies and the Chapel Hill Public Library, Crook's Corner, everybody, because like I said, I found over this time, I haven't had time to read any novels or fiction. I was like, I have too much real life things to read. I just do not have time to read that. But because, really nice lady put your books on my doorstep, that means I have been reading novels now, and I needed it. I did need it. Thank you, ladies. Thank you very much. So now, yeah, because I wasn't reading at all. I was just purchasing them, flipping. Oh, I'll send that to so-and-so, or I'll give that to my son, but I was not reading them. Not at all. I didn't have time. So, I should be checking to see if we have any questions, because our audience is welcome to actually give a question or two out there. So I guess someone definitely wants to know, Cian, are you actually working on another book right now?
I'm not actively working on another book. During the confinement, I have found another form of storytelling that I love. So I am a voice actor as well. So I've been focusing on that right now. It's still text, it's still language, it's still stories. It's very different, but I love it.
Well, I mean, you definitely have a voice for it, I must say. Also, um, let's see, as questions hopefully will come in. One of my questions is, I think, Cian, you definitely said, did it take you 10 years to write? How long did it take you to write?
Oh gosh.
I mean, because, you know, um, some people, they may, like, again, fantasize about how, that the life of an author. And I know this is your first book, just like Debbie's, but I was like, it took a long time.
It took a very long time. I am a very slow writer. I am not one of those people who plans and knows what's happening. It's a very organic process. I write in fragments. It's not linear. So, it's just a lot of different pieces. So it did take a long time. But it also just took a long time to find a home for it, as I said. I had a very long, dispiriting search for an agent, and I got lots of glowing reviews like, wow, this is beautiful. We can't market it. So, as to your question, why do we still have stories like this? Well, the fact that people didn't even want to read stories like this, so representation does still matter.
Yeah, it does. And, I wanted to go back. You mentioned you overheard someone saying something in Harlem, in New York, that sparked this book in the first place. You didn't tell us what that was, I don't think.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I was, well, I'm always eavesdropping because it's such good dialogue, right? But I was walking behind a group of teenage girls, and one of them said, she's pregnant and she's never even had sex.
Imagine.
And, Celie, one of my characters, her mother claimed she was immaculately conceived. And it was literally from that line of dialogue that that character was conceived.
Wow.
I heard a story about Tayari Jones. She was asked once, where did you get the idea for An American Marriage? And she said she was at the mall and she overheard this older couple saying, one of them saying to the other, I wouldn't have waited for you the way you waited for me. And then that was the spark to An American Marriage.
Wow. That is amazing because, she actually came to the area not too long ago. Isn't she based in Atlanta?
I think so,
And
yes.
Yeah.
at Emory. Is she at Emory? I'm not sure.
I think
And
so.
she came and talked about that book. It was great meeting her. I have a few more questions. Well, Elizabeth, what are some of the other books your company has published?
Yeah, I was just going to type, and I will type an answer, the URL that you can go to see all the books. But we've published some books that I'm super proud of. This past year, we published a memoir called Seconds and Inches by a woman named Carly Israel. And it's a real sort of overcoming tragedy, sort of hope story. And then we have a short story collection that was brilliant called Living Color, Angie Rubio Stories by Donna Miscolta. And she's a Seattle-based author and has just gotten so much critical acclaim for her book. Before Cian's book, we published The Birdcatcher and Other Stories, which is an awesome short story collection also about, women in Bangladesh who are feminist and non-gender conforming and queer and other things that are not going to fly in society, and how they sort of overcome those challenges. We have Kingdom of Women, which is a really great sort of dystopian novel about exacting revenge for misogyny in this country. It's a really good therapeutic, cathartic read right now. Kingdom of Women. The Through, it is a beautiful allegoric poetry novel by a man named Andy Johnson. Highly recommend, beautiful writing. And the very first book that we published when we took over was this memoir called The Last of Her. And it's about her, it's sort of investigative journalism, but looking into her own mother's suicide. And the writer's name is Kim Dana Kupperman. And she's one of the most talented writers I have come across in my life. She's just brilliant, and her prose is beautiful, and her books have made me think hard about a lot of things. So I was proud to be a part of publishing that as well. But yeah, I'm going to put the URL here in the chat for you.
Yeah, and I want you to think about maybe just a few tips you can give some aspiring writers, Southern writers, we hope, to who would love to publish one day. But also, there's a question for Cian and Devi. What are your hopes for how your important books might change our society? I know that's a big question, but what do you hope society gets from your work?
Well, in my case, my real big hope is that there are more people who look like me and don't look like me at the table, because publishing is still 86% white and it's mostly male. And I want more diversity. I want all of us to have a chance to tell our stories and to be acknowledged. Things will not change until we get a lot more seats at the table, and yeah, that was what I was hoping for. And one of the things, I belong to this group called VONA, which is Voices of Our Nation's Arts Foundation. And it's a workshop dedicated to people of color. And it's taught by people of color. And my teacher, the year before I was published, she said, you can't change the world all at once, but you can change one thing. And so she said, in your case, why don't you try to get your publisher to not italicize the non-English words in your book? And then that way, all the books that come after you, they can hold up your book as the example of a successfully published book with non-English words that are not italicized or othered. So I developed a 45-minute PowerPoint presentation, and I was ready. And I tried to go to my editor. I called her up and I'm like, I have something to tell you. And I started to launch into my little presentation, and she cut me off and she goes, you wrote a book about being other. Of course, I'm not going to italicize your work. And then I'm like, oh, great. And then I'm like, what am I doing with this 45-minute presentation? Because now I don't need it anymore.
But the presentation in the public domain, other people need it.
Yeah, and it was great though, because so many people I know who came right after me, they said it was so great to see that you had no italicized, non-English words. And they did hold it up to their editors and their publishers and look, I don't have to italicize and you don't, because she didn't have to. And so something small like that actually does have a ripple effect. So,
Cian, what do you hope society gets from your book?
Well, sort of what I mentioned earlier, a few writers who've told me they think about current events now in a more personal way, that they're able to sort of understand in a way that they didn't. It's no longer just the scary term of like systemic racism, oppression, that it's like, oh, it's tied to real lives and real people. And so I think that's already really great.
before we have to wrap up, there was a question about character development. You know, maybe you could give it just a hint, tip about your process.
In the 1 minute remaining.
The 1 minute. Oh, we do have 1 minute.
I will just tell you what I tell because I've given talks to high schoolers and college students too, and we're writers. We got to write every day, even if it's just for 10 minutes. Doctors, they don't call it medical perfect, they call it medical practice because they practice their medicine every day. And writers, we should write every day.
Well, at least go to Elizabeth. What tip that you have for aspiring authors?
Oh yeah, I put it in the chat. Be persistent and just don't stop submitting. Like every
Oh.
single day, submit and submit and submit again. It's a numbers game. And really the thing that is crazy to think about, but is true, is that the only thing that's required for your book to get a wide readership and be published is 1, maximum 2 people in the world who get it and love it. It's a
Wow.
little bit messed up that that's the case, but that's the case. So you just have to keep sending it until you find that one person, either an agent who will then find the second person who's the editor at the publisher, or you go direct to the publisher and you find that one person. Just keep doing it.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. I'm not sure, Maya, if there's something else you'd like me to do, but here's As a River. Can you see it? See it? And then also the Atlas of Reds and Blues. So that's up there.
Thank you.
And just thank you very much and congratulations. Wow, you've accomplished
so
much.
much.
You've accomplished much.
Congratulations, Sian. That was an amazing novel.
Thanks so much for having us and congratulations, Sian. It's good to see you.
Yes.
Thank you all so much for being here, and thank you, Leoneda, so much.
Thank
and
you.
if you didn't see it in the chat, I dropped a link to the survey. If you could please fill it out and give us your feedback. We always want to improve. Thank you so much. And I'll also include in an email tomorrow to all registered attendees the link to that survey again, and also a link to watch the video that we couldn't watch tonight, so you can see the giant check that we wanted to give to Cian. And there will also be a recording of this event available online soon as well. So I'll include that in the email as well when it's available. Thank you all so much again. Thank you, Leoneda. Congratulations, Cian, Debbie. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. Thanks, Maya.
Thank you.